As you all know, our theme this month is Dare to Dream. And today's topic is Be the Power of Love, which is also a quote from the song that you just sang, Dare to Dream, which, as you know, was written and recorded by Suze Ogden. So, be the power of love. Now, wow, that can have many connotations, can't it? It can mean an undertone, a suggestion, an implication. It can also mean the force of love or the results of love, even a negative impact from love. So I'm using it here today, now, as one of the attributes of creative spirit, which is imbued within each one of us. Just as the words in the song Dare to Dream suggest, be one with God. Give up the fight. Be the power of love. You're a child of light. You know, frequently you have heard me say, excuse me, bring forward from the past only that which serves you in a positive, life-affirming way in the present, and release the rest of it. And today, in this talk, I'd like to bring forward to the present some ideas from a series I did about 3 years ago. And it was titled Love. It's highly recommended. And as I look around the room this morning, I would surmise that maybe two of you were active in the center at that time. So for you two, this may sound familiar. And for the others, perhaps some new ideas can be planted. So the first idea worth keeping and bringing forward into the now moment is that love is highly recommended as a union of hearts and minds which honors each one just as he or she presently is. How powerful that is when we can accept others in their present state and they can accept us in our present state, based on the reminder that each one of us is the creation of divine mind. The power in that is that they do not have to meet all of our own criteria in order for us to love them, and we don't have to meet all of theirs. I believe that loving, is being in a very high state of awareness. It's the sense of being in sync, if you know what I mean, in step, in communion. And this is a heightened sense of self as well, of life force, of connectedness. It inspires our feelings and our emotions. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves that love is God's gift to us, that it's the self-givingness of spirit. It's God expressing itself through its creation. And that would be you and me, and some others that we think differently about sometimes. The power of God's love is non-judgmental. It's without criticism or retribution. It's constant. It's unwavering. In Hawkins' book, Power versus Force, he describes love as an unconditional, unchanging, and permanent force. It also rates quite high on his scale of 0 to 1,000 in terms of awareness or consciousness. He says love does not fluctuate within us because it's not dependent on any external factors. It's a state of being. It's a state of forgiveness. It's a state of nurturing. It's a supportive state. Love emanates from the heart. Love, he says, takes no position and thus is global, rising above the separation of positionality, the act of taking a position, taking a side. Love is therefore inclusive and expands the sense of self progressively, keeps on expanding. It focuses on the goodness of life in all its expressions. It dissolves negativity by recontextualizing, another one of his big words, recontextualizing, rebuilding it, reconstructing it, rather than attacking it. Now he's talking about negativity. Turn it into something positive, rather than continuing to try and change it by denying its right. He also gently coaches us to recognize that the power of creative spirit's love is a quality that we pass on to loving others once we have it in place with spirit, which is another way of saying we must love ourselves in spirit. That is, recognizing that spirit loves us and we can love ourselves as spirit loves us. Once we have that in place with spirit, then we can learn to love ourselves. So, sort of like the talk from 2 weeks ago, deep in every heart and mind, plus the talk title last week, this is our spiritual wake-up call. The message is first to love spirit, even as we know it loves us in the creative process. And then to love ourselves, knowing that we are spirit's greatest accomplishment, each one of us. And then as we've established that, then we can begin to love others. Now, consider the power of love and how to apply that. Spirit applies it through the creative process from thought into form. That being the case, how do we apply it? Same way. Thought into form. So here are some thoughts from Ernest Holmes on the power of love. Just as there is a harmonious reciprocal action of love between the infinite, God, spirit, creative energy, and its creations, here we are, that would be us, so also in the thought of the human, there is the reciprocal action between the expression of love on the part of a human for the conditions, situations, and people in his or her experience. Now, I want to qualify something, because something that came up in Standing in the Light earlier gave us an example of all the different ways in which spirit expresses by means of humanity. And some of those, at first look, appear to be very negative. And what's that about? And what that is about is that each of us has been given the gift of choice upon arrival here in this plane of existence. And so the way in which we use the gift of choice may look very differently in one person as compared to the next, and that may be very positive. And it's frustrating for us sometimes to understand that. What we must understand, not only about ourselves, but about others, is that everyone is on his or her own path of self-discovery. Every one of us is here on purpose at the level of our understanding or our consciousness. And if you go back and you read Hawkins' books and you look at the lower levels of consciousness that he talks about pride, he talks about blame, he talks about guilt, he talks about the negative levels of energy expressing. It gives us an opportunity to understand why the behaviors of others seem to be at such a low vibration. Why does that happen? That happens because life is a process of self-discovery. So the best that we can do for anyone other than ourselves is to support them on their path of self-discovery. And that is not always sweetness and light, but rather to know for them what brings their highest and best good unfolds. That's why we don't call it out for anybody else, because we might be much too kind, or we may be way too brutal in our assessment of others. But in recognizing for their highest and best good, and we had one example in Standing in the Light where it took a few years for that to unfold in a different way in the relationship between two people. When you are always focused in that direction, you can rest assured that progress is unfolding. Be willing to look for it. Here are some more thoughts from Dr. Holmes on the power of love. The conditions or persons that we feel inclined to dislike or to hate, that actually causes us to repel the good, because we become focused on the negative, on the hate, on the lack, on the absence. Here's what he says. He makes it very easy for us to understand. Love attracts. Hate repels. Love attracts good. Hate repels good. Love attracts Love attracts health. Hate repels health, both physical and emotional. And then he goes on to say, so what we do in the process of hating, even in some of its milder forms, is to block the flow of good to and from our own selves. And sadly, in that process, our hearts, our stomachs, our gallbladders, our joints, our bodies are compromised. Forgetting everything else, Holmes says, we are faced with a simple matter of expediency of expressing love for our own preservation. Whoa. The physical state of health we can enjoy depends to a large degree on the amount of love or hate in our thought. Now, rather than jumping to judgment on this before you leave this room today, think about that this week and how that plays out in the physical. It's got to go somewhere. When we are not resolving what's in our minds, what's in our thoughts, in our concerns, our fears, it's got to go somewhere. And where it goes is how you express your essence in this plane of existence, and that's your body. So think on that. And while you're at it, find something to like, Dr. Holmes says. Find something to like. Let the reciprocal action of love inherent in the universe flow in and through you and out into every phase of your experience. We talked about that last month, didn't we? Actually, it was month before last. Are you having any fun? I guess it was last week. Are you having any fun? See, it's a setup. These talks are setups, I admit. Because if it flows out, it has to return. Find something of value in everyone, no matter how large or small. Sometimes it seems small. Find something of value in everyone. Then focus on that alone where that person is concerned, and eventually the love you are begins to flow from you. And we heard that discussed in Standing in the Light this morning, about the recognition of someone whose skills and gifts far exceeded their own belief or understanding of that. So the action of love in and through us must be universal in all our experience. We can't love in one direction and hate in another. This doesn't mean being chummy or best of friends with everybody. Just let go of having dislike and hatred gnawing at our minds and our bodies. One of our ministers back in Florida used to say, let something good be said about anything, anyone. Let something good be said. Find one thing good and focus on that. So for some of us, we may need to begin by sincerely forgiving ourselves for all emissions or lack of love in the past. Let them go. Replace them with some idea of love that we can discover relative to those previous situations in our own lives or in the lives of those around us. So, as you can see and hear, there is great power in love. It's a power that heals. It's a power that grows us. It's a power that guides us into a loving atmosphere throughout our lives. And yes, we look for and are in gratitude for the ability to surround ourselves with others like that. Because that enables us to grow stronger in love so that we can share it with those who have not yet learned its physical, its mental, its emotional, and its spiritual value. Here's a quote that I had not heard before I started putting this talk together. And it's from Edwin Markham, who was an American poet in the early 20th century. He said, "There is a destiny that makes us sisters and brothers. No one goes their way alone. All that we send into the lives of others comes back into our own." And so it is.
And so it is.